Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 281, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira goes down on November 12th. And this is one of the greatest UFC fight cards on paper. But I have three legitimate gripes about UFC 281. And that's exactly what this video is going to be. The top three reasons I hate UFC 281. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand this is a great card on paper. But the complaints I haven't just pulled out of thin air. They are legitimate gripes. And this video idea was kind of born from UFC 279, Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev, which this card in general was just an absolute shit stain of a fight card. The mismatch in the main event, I know it ended up getting flipped and flopped all around and it ended up not happening. But I hated UFC 279 with an absolute passion, and I made a video about it. And then I thought to myself, this would be interesting to do for UFC 280, and I did it for UFC 280. And then I thought, you know what? People liked it for UFC 280. Maybe I'll do it for UFC 281. So this is going to be my top three reasons I hate UFC 281. In a couple days, I will do a video of the top three reasons I love UFC 281. If the video is already done by the time you're watching this, it will be linked down in the description. You can check it out after this. But don't get me wrong, guys. I understand this is a phenomenal card. I understand that it's stacked with amazing matchups. You know, you got Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira for the middleweight title. You got Carla Esparza versus Weili Zhang for the strawweight title. You got Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. You have Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelles. You have Frankie Edgar's retirement fight against Chris Gutierrez. You have Aaron Blanchfield versus Molly McCann. You have Anato Moicano versus Brad Riddell. I can go on. The list goes on and on and on. I understand there's great fights. Don't comment down below and tell me this is a great card. I don't know what I'm talking about. Because all three of these reasons are legitimate reasons that I dislike UFC 281. I'm still going to buy it. I'm still going to watch it. I'm still going to do prediction videos for it. And this is just it. This is just it. These are the reasons I dislike UFC 281. The reasons I hate UFC 281. And they're all legitimate gripes. And I am praying to the MMA gods. Because the number one reason that I'm going to get to, which is going to be the last reason I get to, I'm going to go from 3 to 1. The number one reason is kind of speculative. It's not set in stone just yet. And every day I am praying to the MMA gods that the number one reason I hate UFC 281 does not come to fruition. So let's hope that doesn't happen, but we'll get to that in a minute. If you guys want to see me continue doing these videos, top three reasons I hate, top three reasons I love, for every UFC pay-per-view, let me know down in the comments because I do whatever videos you guys want to see. I'm always taking polls in the community tabs of what videos you want me to make. So let me know down in the comments if this is something you want me to continue to do for each and every UFC pay-per-view. Okay, let's start off with the number three reason I hate UFC 281. And that is a very simple reason. Carla Esparza is fighting. Carla Esparza versus Rose Namajunas 2 back at UFC 274 was one of the most egregious fights I've ever seen. It was a god-awful fight. It was a shit-stained fight. It was an embarrassment to the MMA community. It was an embarrassment to the women's MMA community. And after that fight, and I watched that fight twice because I made a video about it afterwards, and I said, you know what, I got to watch this again so I can make this video. I told you guys, I never want to see Carla Esparza or Rose Namajunas ever step in the octagon ever again. I want Carla Esparza banned from MMA, okay? Ban Carla Esparza, ban Rose Namajunas from ever fighting in MMA again. I do not want to see them fight. That fight was so bad. It was so awful. I don't even know if you can call it a fight now that I'm thinking of it. Did they throw any strikes? I mean, this was an atrocious performance by both girls, and I never want to see them fight again. And the fact that now we have one of the most anticipated fight cards of the year in UFC 281, and I got to watch Carla Esparza trot out there with a belt wrapped around her waist. She should be stripped, and she should be cut from the UFC along with Rose Namajunas, and I never want to see them fight again. So that is the number three reason I hate UFC 281. You guys can let me know what you think about that down in the comments. Just because Carla Esparza is fighting Weili Zhang. I know this is still a fun matchup. Weili Zhang is a fan favorite. She's always in exciting fights. And I'm looking forward to seeing Weili Zhang fight. But I really don't know if I can watch Carla. If Carla Esparza pulls this fight off and wins, and I have to see her walk out of MSG with a belt wrapped around her waist, I literally think I'm going to throw up in my mouth. I do not think I will be able to stand it. Okay, moving on to the number 2 reason I hate UFC 281. And I look at the featured fight on the main card. I look at Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. What could you possibly hate about that, Joey? I know that's what you're thinking right now. What could you possibly hate about that fight? Because Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler is an amazing fight. Stylistically, there's no way this fight's boring. In the rankings, they're both top 5 ranked fighters. This fight is of importance. This is two basically MMA legends. I know a lot of people say Michael Chandler just got to the UFC. I followed Michael Chandler the entire time he was in Bellator. Those fights with Eddie Alvarez were incredible. He had a great career over at Bellator, former lightweight Bellator champion. And Dustin Poirier, ever since Michael Chandler came to the UFC, Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler is a fight that I wanted to see. And this is an incredible fight. But the reason I'm mad about this fight, and I've talked about this on various occasions about other fights, why is Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler not 5 rounds? This is a fight that I understand could end in the first round. Michael Chandler comes out throwing absolute bombs. Dustin Poirier is a finisher himself, has never been in a boring fight. I get it. It may not even make it 3 rounds. But for a fight of this magnitude, for a fan-friendly matchup that has fight of the year potential like Poirier versus Chandler does, why do we not have those extra rounds as a safety net? You're doing it for Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards. You're doing it for Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler. You're having 5-round fights, non-title, non-main events for those fights. But Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler can't get 5 rounds. And I've complained about this before with other fights. One being Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. Look what happened. You kind of had a controversial decision there. People thought Gilbert Burns won. People thought Khamzat Chimaev won. Well, guess what? We wouldn't have been in that situation had we had 5 rounds. You look at Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley. Similar situation for a number 1 contender spot in the bantamweight division. An incredible fight. And we get a controversial split decision. Well, guess what? We probably wouldn't have had that problem if it was 5 rounds. So this happens time and time again. I understand the UFC can't make every fight on the card 5 rounds. I get it. But they have a history of doing, I think the Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards fight, there was 2 other 5-round fights on the card. So there was a total of 3 5-round fights on the card. And I understand the UFC has to pay these guys extra money when they fight for 5 rounds. But there is no reason a fight of the magnitude of Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler shouldn't be 5 rounds. And even more, you look at both guys. I know they both lost to Charles Oliveira. But guess what? Charles Oliveira isn't the lightweight champion anymore. Islam Makhachev is now the new lightweight champion. So you know what that means? This has title implications now. And even before it had title implications, there's a chance Chandler could earn a rematch with Charles Oliveira. He was very close to defeating him in that first fight. But now that Makhachev's the champion, Dustin Poirier has never fought Makhachev. Michael Chandler has never fought Makhachev. So there's a real possibility. I know you got Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski looming out there. But after that happens, depends on what happens in the division, the winner of Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler may very well be the number 1 contender. And if we're having a number 1 contender fight or something that even looks like a number 1 contender fight or might have the possibility of being a number 1 contender fight, I believe in those instances, every single number 1 contender fight should be a 5-round fight. You need those extra rounds in case it's a close competitive fight. And then also, again, I think I said this in the beginning, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler has the real possibility to be a fight of the year contender. It could be a crazy back and forth fight with nasty momentum swings. I could see Chandler dropping Poirier recovering, coming back, swarming Michael Chandler. If it gets to a 3rd round and the 3rd round plays out and, it's still a close fight and it's a competitive fight and we're robbed of a 4th and 5th round, I will be very, very disappointed that this was not a 5-round fight. But maybe I'm wrong. But the last 2 times, Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns at UFC 273 and Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley at UFC 280, those were the last 2 times I complained about a 5-round fight not being made there. So hopefully I'm wrong on this one. Hopefully we don't need 5 rounds, but it's going to be really disappointing if we do actually need 5 rounds in this fight. Moving on to my number 1 reason that I hate UFC 281. And again, this one is actually purely speculative, okay? I am praying every day to the MMA gods that this does not happen and the MMA gods do not do us dirty. But the number one reason that I hate UFC 281 is I believe there is a real possibility Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira can be a boring fight. And, it's super unfortunate. It's super unfortunate. This is a highly hyped up fight. It's for the middleweight title. It's two of the best in the world at 185 pounds. It has an amazing backstory. You have the fact that Pereira has knocked out Israel Adesanya before and beaten him by decision in kickboxing. This fight has everything. But you look at the fact that Israel Adesanya, you look at the past, you look at the Jared Cannonier fight, you look at the Robert Whittaker fight, you look at the Marvin Vettori fight, the last 3 title defenses of Israel Adesanya, they weren't particularly action-packed. They weren't very good, okay? And I've been a defender of Adesanya. I understand that, one mistake, and next thing you know, you're looking up at the lights, you're knocked out cold. I understand Adesanya is trying to keep his belt. He's fighting some of the best guys in the world. And the Robert Whittaker fight at UFC 271 wasn't particularly awful, okay? But the Jared Cannonier fight at 276, it just ruined the entire card. The card was already a little bit of a letdown with the Munoz eye poke and all, or the O'Malley eye poke and everything. But just having that main event was just ugh. And then you look back at the Marvin Vettori main event, wasn't very good either. And then you look back, all the way back at the Yoel Romero at UFC 248. I think that may be the most let down I've ever been with a main event, because Adesanya versus Romero was a massively hyped up fight. And I was really looking forward to that. A lot of people were really looking forward to that. And that was just a terrible performance by both guys. And I am praying to God that Adesanya versus Pereira does not repeat that history. But you look at Adesanya, he's very smart. He has a very high fight IQ. And you take into the account that he's been KO'd by Alex Pereira before. And I'm hoping Alex Pereira can put the pressure on him. But I think Adesanya is going to come in and fight super conservative, try to use his footwork, pump his jab, and chop at the legs so that he can win this fight against Alex Pereira. I don't think Adesanya is going to come out aggressively against a guy that's KO'd him before. And may it be a very high-level kickboxing match? It may very well be. But I just have this fear that we're going to get another Israel Adesanya stinker. And if this fight is a stinker, because I'm really looking forward to this fight, to be honest, if it ends up being a stinker like I think it may end up being, we got to take Israel Adesanya out of pay-per-view main events. I can't watch him headline a pay-per-view anymore. Because, that would basically be 4 fights in a row where he just pumped the jab at range, used his footwork. And I get, he's had some exciting fights. Kelvin Gastelum, one of the greatest middleweight fights of all time. The first fight against Robert Whittaker was incredible. The Paulo Costa fight, went out there and outclassed him. But, if we get a 4th stinker in a row, I just don't know how we can have him as a main event anymore. And if he beats Alex Pereira, who's left to challenge him? There's really nobody left to challenge him. Within the middleweight division, you have Nasruddin Imavov making their way up, Andre Muniz. Are either one of those guys going to be able to make it an exciting fight against Adesanya? That remains to be seen. I think it's highly unlikely. So I just really have a feeling Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira is going to be an absolute stinker and a boring fight. And I don't want to see Adesanya in any more main events after this fight, if this fight is indeed an absolute stinker and a boring fight. But I'm praying to the MMA gods that does not happen. So let me know what you guys think, about the top 3 reasons I hate UFC 281. Is there any reasons I missed? Is there anything that you guys could say, okay, well, this is the reason I don't like UFC 281? Because I'm genuinely curious. Obviously this is a great card. Obviously it's stacked with competitive, elite level, very important fights. And I'm really looking forward to them. But at the same time, all 3 of these reasons are legitimate gripes. Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.